domestic and family violence. All right, let's go to our federal political panel now. Joining me today are Senator Bridget McKenzie and Labor's Andrew Leigh.
Great to be with you, Matt.
G'day, Matt.
G'day,
Bridget.
Thank you for being with me. Thank you for being with me. Can I just start, Senator, with you on the issue of the Women's Summit? How hopeful are you that of all the talk fests that we've had, this could be something that actually leads to real change?
Oh, Matt, it's exactly what women and men around the country have been calling for, and I've been saying for quite a few weeks now we need to have a bipartisan approach to dealing with the issue of sexual assault, harassment and violence against women. And I'm very proud to be part of a government that's called a national summit into women's safety end of July. And I know governments of all colours will come together on that day to end violence against women and children. We've seen a lot of crime statistics go down over COVID-19, but the one appalling statistic that's gone through the roof is that of domestic violence. And coming from my home state of Victoria, locking families up together in those sort of situations has had dire consequences. So I'm really hopeful of positive outcomes end of July.
Yeah, and before July, of course, we've got the budget. How confident are you that there'll be more money spent in this area?
Well, it is about money on the ground through a range of services in community, but it's also about culture change in the long term, and that is up to each and every one of us as individuals, men and women, deciding to change the way we behave and interact with each other, and to demonstrate that respect for women is a non-negotiable. So I'm looking forward to not just the budget and seeing initiatives announced that will support the economic empowerment and the safety of women and children, but also I think individuals saying as one that no more to that sort of behaviour. I mean, I'm hearing two things on the ground out here. One is the dire consequences of the domestic violence increase, but the second is that the vast majority of very good men, particularly young men, are finding this current situation difficult to negotiate and needing sort of to feel confidence in their masculinity and that they do respect women, and having that known and feeling comfortable to interact in the workplace and obviously in the broader community.
Andrew Leigh, can I bring you in here? Is this something that Labor is going to give bipartisan support for?
Absolutely, Matt. Bridget's quite right about the upsurge in family violence during the pandemic, but you've got to not only match those good words with real action. What we've seen in the Parliament is the Coalition voting against Labor's call for there to be 10 days of domestic violence leave for victims, and instead putting forward a harebrained idea that family violence victims would dip into their own superannuation. This isn't just an issue of violence, it's also an issue of equity. As we heard from the Queensland Minister, Shannon Fentanyl, before, you need to ensure that we're dealing with the gender pay gap in superannuation, which means increase in the superannuation contribution. We need to make sure we're dealing with gender inequity at work, which means measures such as Labor's plan to prevent pay secrecy clauses. You need to deal with the challenge in childcare, which is why Anthony Albanese made last year's budget reply centred around childcare. But from Scott Morrison, we've got somebody who's consistently made cuts when he was Treasurer and now as Prime Minister to these frontline services. They've got cuts coming down the pipeline as a result of the government's decisions. It's just not good enough to point to the importance of the issue. You have to actually be committed to gender change. For men, it's a matter of dealing with our own behaviour, with calling out bad behaviour from other blokes, but also supporting policies that ensure we have a more equal Australia.
And can I just move from the general topic to the specific treatment of a particular woman, Senator McKenzie? Christine Holgate, the former chief of Australia Post, has written a submission to a Senate inquiry about being stood down after gifting some staff watches after they successfully won a big contract with 3 of the major banks. How would you describe her treatment, and given that she also didn't break any rules?
Well, I think you raised the pertinent point there, Matt, that she was found through an inquiry started after this incident came to light in Senate estimates, that she was found to act within her legal authority. And that's a very, very important point. You're right, her submission raises a raft of significant issues that I'll be prosecuting along with other senators next Tuesday in a public hearing. Previously, I think Christine has been a champion of rural and regional licensed post offices out there in the bush, over 2,500 of them. And the contract you speak about actually brought those post offices financial sustainability going forward as major service providers in small country towns. So her work there was critical to the survival of post offices out in the bush, and they feel very strongly about her being reinstated. I think these are important issues that need to be examined, and that'll be something I'll be following up on behalf of services out in rural and regional Australia.
You know what the full weight of the media spotlight feels like after quitting your cabinet post over that so-called sports rorts affair. Are standards different for women than men?
Oh, look, I wouldn't like to make that comparison. Matt, I think you have to judge everything on its merits. You know, I think Christine's case needs to be examined. I think she does raise some specific issues, particularly her concerns with the chairman of Australia Post and his treatment of her following the media storm that erupted in Senate estimates. So as I said, I'm looking forward to prosecuting that next week. And
you think that she should be reinstated, though?
Well, I think it's important for Christine to have the opportunity to put her case on the public record, which her submission has done, and that we'll be able to prosecute next week as senators during the hearing, so that it is publicly transparent around these issues. And we'll be able to prosecute, obviously, the department and talk to licensed post officers and the chair himself next
Sounds like
Tuesday
you're sympathetic
afternoon.
to her getting her job back, though.
Well, I can only speak for the facts. She did an amazing job in the financial sustainability of rural and regional licensed post office holders. There's over 2,500 of them out in the regions. That deal with the banks that you talk about actually meant that people in small country towns could access financial services like people in the city take for granted all the time through the Australian Post. And I think that's an important service that needs to be provided, and she was the one that drove that outcome. So I've written to the current board of Australia Post, asking for the next CEO to make sure they're similarly as committed to the financial sustainability of our rural post offices as she was, because it was absolutely fantastic what she was able to do.
Well, Matt, if only you go on, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Andrew. I mean, I just wanted to reflect on at the time when the Prime Minister was quite thunderous in Parliament in saying that if she wasn't going to stand aside, she must go, and then quite measured with the commentary around his own MPs, Andrew Laming, his ministers and others. What do you think about the treatment of Christine Holgate?
I was just reflecting there as Bridget was speaking before, Matt, if only Christine Holgate had got the sort of measured, thoughtful response to her decisions that Bridget has outlined there. But she didn't. She got the Prime Minister thundering in the Parliament. She can go. And we know now that the independent inquiry started 2 hours after that. It's a complete contrast from the treatment of Christian Porter, where the Prime Minister said he was entitled to the presumption of innocence and the rule of law. None of that applied to his treatment of Christine Holgate. And her submission again points out that the Australia Post Board really has become a dysfunctional swamp of Liberal Party hacks and Morrison supporters. And it's unfit to be running such a large organisation as Australia Post. I think this inquiry is going to bring to light not only the way in which the Prime Minister operates, but also the need for an overhaul of the Australia Post Board. It is too important an organisation to be run like a Liberal Party branch meeting.
Senator Mackenzie, can I just switch quickly to Andrew Laming, your Queensland Coalition colleague. Anne Ruston was asked earlier on and said he has to have a serious think about his actions and described what he's done as abhorrent. Do you think he's fit and proper person to be in Parliament?
Oh, look, I made a raft of public comments around Andrew's behaviour last week when the National Party senators were on the ground in the Hunter Valley, talking up the coal industry. What a surprise. But, you know, Andrew's made the right decision to not run at the next election. This current investigation from the AEC, you know, will run its course. So I didn't think it was appropriate. He's made the right decision not to run. I've got nothing more to really add.
All right, well, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for your time, Senator Bridget McKenzie from the Nationals and Andrew Leigh from the Labor Party. Thank you so much today.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Bridget.